support and management issues, and strategic development to a broad range of clients ranging from farmers to food processors, academic institutions to governments. Robynne represents accredited organizations at the United Nations, bringing the voice of agriculture in multi-governmental processes. She established the first private sector mechanism representing agribusiness at the UN Committee on World Food Security. She led the 2-year-long negotiations for obtaining the declaration by the UN General Assembly of the International Year of Pulses. Robynne is a spokesperson and public speaker on international agricultural, food and nutrition issues. She spoke at the UN General Assembly, Rio+20, the UN Committee on World Food Security, and the UN negotiations on Sustainable Development Goals. In 2017, she was inducted to the Canadian Agricultural Hall of Fame, being the youngest person to ever receive that honor. Ladies and gentlemen, Robynne Anderson, President, Emerging Ag Incorporated.
Hello, it's a great pleasure to be joining you today. I want to thank Pradeep, IPGA, and the entire team and all of you in the audience for letting me join you on World Pulses Day. There's no more exciting moment to celebrate than when we have the world talking about pulses. And this is particularly true because, of course, there's no place that pulses are more important to than the wonderful world of Indian pulses. You are the biggest producer, you are the biggest consumer of pulses, and the world turns to you at this critical moment. And I know in the last session you've been discussing some of the internal issues related to the pulse sector that are very important. And my moment today is to talk to you a little bit about the ways in which you can engage in some of the broader discussions, because even in times when you're thinking about your own internal policies, it's always important to remember that India has a leadership role to play around the world. And it's particularly important this year in 2021. 2 years ago, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that he would convene a special food system summit. It's the first major UN event on food in 25 years. And it's the first one that's specifically designated as being about food systems, the whole of how you produce food all the way through consumption of food. And in this respect, he has appointed Dr. Agnes Kalibata to be his special envoy. She is a former Minister of Agriculture in Rwanda, herself very expert on agriculture, and leads the African Green Revolution Alliance. During that event, they are going to be focusing on 4 outcomes. First of all, they want significant action and commitment to action related to food systems. And who better than India to talk about the way in which you have a unique relationship with food. You have a sector that has been a very forward, pulse-focused diet for millennia, and the rest of the world is watching and thinking about how they can replicate some of the things that you do well in your daily food choices. They want a dramatically elevated public discourse. Years ago, for International Year of Pulses, we had India engaged online in Twitter. There are communities online for the SDG discussion and specifically for the Food Systems Summit discussion. What a moment to turn outward and take a leadership position about the role of India on pulses in this discussion. There's also going to be a high-level set of principles that might talk about the importance of diverse diets, to be thinking about the role pulses can play in people's diets or other great Indian products like spices. And we really do encourage you to have the Indian government also involved in its role as a seat at the UN, talking about some of those important opportunities. And then on top of that, very important for business, a system of follow-up and review will be developed. So as individual companies and sectors make commitments related to the Food System Summit, there is the opportunity to follow up on that and to make sure that whatever you do promise gets delivered upon. And IPGA has some great things to talk about. There are lots of activities, and they're generally grouped into 5 action tracks. The first is about safe and nutritious food for all. It has work streams on achieving zero hunger, access to nutritious food, and safe food. And there are opportunities to get on to talk about that. They've had open surveys, they're having regular public fora. So there is a chance to talk specifically about the role of pulses, and I would argue even about the role of Indian cuisine in these discussions. The second action track is focused on sustainable consumption patterns, and here's where we're seeing lots of discussion, particularly about the role of plant-based diets, of pulses, of fruits and vegetables. There's a discussion about food loss and waste, food demand, food environments. How are we interacting with consumers? How are you getting products into people's hands that could be raw pulses or processed pulses? And some of the opportunities here are particularly great. One of the only Indians on the leadership team related to the action tracks for the Food Systems Summit is actually on Action Track 2. And you may also be aware that the EAT Foundation that's leading this action track is very interested in the discussion about encouraging the consumption of more plant-based foods. So you have 2 points of intersection on Action Track 2, and really an opportunity to talk about what you do so well in India. And some of the priorities that they're discussing there are things like the procurement and support of local and healthy foods, thinking about school meals and education programs, adding food systems and into education curriculum, harnessing the power of public procurement, which is important as well in your context. And then thinking about things like food demand. How do you ensure environmental sustainability gets into dietary guidelines? And we're hearing this in several parts of the discussions globally. And as the last speaker was saying, there's a little bit here in terms of the opportunity about pulses to be part of the solution in this regard. And certainly through earlier parts of today, I was sitting in on the UN Committee on Food Security's discussion about healthy diets, about food systems and nutrition, where they're adopting new voluntary guidelines. And this kind of reference is very, very important. And we heard time and time again on World Pulses Day from global leaders how important it is to think about the role of pulses in a sustainable and healthy diet. And we're keen to see lots of opportunity to be talking about involving the private sector. Action Track 3 is on boosting nature-positive production at sufficient scale. What might nature-positive production mean? Well, again, there's a great role for pulses, because amongst the things they're talking about are how to protect things like biodiversity. So how do we make sure that agriculture is using diverse crops, that's protecting all the amazing range of pulses that exist? What can you be doing to talk about all the different ways India is better than most parts of the world at having a really diverse basket of pulses under production? Manage. How are you managing your sustainability system? And again, think about the role of pulses in reducing greenhouse gas emissions and fixing nitrogen in soils, lower water use. You have a great story to tell. And restoring ecosystems, thinking about degraded lands and some of the challenges that you have faced in India and that the world has faced in terms of soil quality and in terms of the ecosystems that we need to support. So some of the things that they're looking at here, and over the next few months heading into the summit, which will be in September of this coming year, they're going to make some decisions about what the priorities are. So these are very much things that are being discussed. So think about the role of protect and restore riparian buffer zones. So what are the roles of intercropping and some of the things that you can do with pulses in the way that they're produced in India? Again, agrobiodiversity, which I spoke about earlier. How do you make sure that you're getting the breadth of pulses into that marketplace getting consumers to pull them through, and encouraging farmers to grow them, including women farmers, and restoring those degraded lands. And it seems almost certain that there will be something about soil organic carbon or carbon farming. There are lots of ways they're talking about it, but this fundamental role for making sure that pulses are part of the system that actually allow agriculture to have a net positive outcome on GHG emissions. Something that agriculture is being criticized quite a bit right now is its impact on climate change. And pulses are part of reversing that story. And then there's some other complex issues that are being discussed, like the notion of integrating environmental standards into food trade and some kind of codex planetarius, or thinking about how to repurpose agricultural subsidies. These are things that are very relevant to the discussion you were just having. And then action track 4 on equitable livelihoods. How do you empower people, have inclusive policies and productivity and fair shares for people around the world? And again, this is a lot of what you were just discussing. And in this respect, there need to build resilience to vulnerabilities, shocks, and stresses. Think about the horrific accident that just happened with the glacier breakthrough in India this week, and so sorry for the loss of life. We see more and more extreme events occurring all over the world, and farmers are often on the front lines of those events. How do you build up disaster risk resilience, climate smart agriculture, and how do you address social protection floors for farmers who are often some of the world's most poor? So these are the kinds of things that are being discussed, and they're being talked about in the context of game-changing initiatives. And these are being developed around the world, but there are, in fact, so far, there aren't enough submissions coming from Asia. So IPGA could be thinking about the kinds of things you've been doing on dredging canals, new approaches to helping feed young people. There are so many opportunities to intersect with this discussion in a positive way, including the things that you're doing at a national level. And a few of them are around that carbon sequestration and labeling, increase of healthier or plant-based foods, and innovation hubs. You know, there's a discussion going on in India right now about how to accelerate new innovations in agriculture, but also in food. So I'm phoning in from Canada, where we have Beyond Burger and all sorts of actors talking about new products, new ways of using pulses, fractionations, and other opportunities to include these things. That's only one part of the story, because the biggest part of the story is to remember the way the Indian diet personifies some of these new emerging trends. And I think from an Indian consumer perspective, you have a unique relationship with these products, with pulses. You may wish to add some of these new fractionated and alternate uses for pulses into your mix in India to further the role of the pulse sector. But most of all, I also want to remind you that years ago, you did the Love India food contest. You were engaged in these amazing discussions about the role of India as the culinary heart of pulse consumption. And I think there is really a moment right now, especially on World Pulse Day, but on every day, and particularly in 2021 during the Food Systems Summit, for you to be thinking about how to talk to the rest of the world about India's importance in this sector. Thank you so much. It's such a great honor to be with you today and to wish you a very, very happy World Pulse Day.
Thank you so much, Robynne.